And welcome wherever you are around the world to the final week of 100% Cricket Leading the Game series. Well, we've been tested a little bit today. We apologise for starting a little bit late. Technology has not been on our side. Unfortunately, there will be no video for this webinar, so it'll just be like an upmarket kind of podcast. I can, however, say that for 100% unity in terms of creating inclusive environments to encourage more girls and women to take part in cricket, we still will be able to take all your questions. So please still use the Q&A function that you'll see on your screen. You can ask a general question or something really specific that we might not have covered over the next 35 minutes or so with our two guests. Be brave, wave your flag, put your name down, your country, your cricket, your association, and we'll give you a shout out. If a question that you would like is already in that area, please press like too, because the more likes a question gets, the more chance I've got of seeing it at the end as well to ask that question of our guests. This will be recorded as well. We will put it up on the ICC website on Thursday, the 25th of June. Now, I can't say we've saved the best till last because we've had some magnificent guests over the last 5 weeks, but I certainly can say we've probably saved the biggest to last. So to round out 100% Cricket webinar series, we are talking all things participation from two of the biggest participation sports in the world, cricket and football, which means our two guests have the two biggest roles in sport. Firstly, I'd like to say that I did say two guests. There is an apology from Dr. Sarah Fain, but I would suggest if you get an opportunity to do a little bit of a Google search on her and the amazing work she's done in Afghanistan and now with the MCC as well. However, we get to hear from two people at the coalface of participation and who have first-hand knowledge of what works in attracting and keeping girls and women in the game at all levels. Firstly, from the world of football, and I apologise if a little sneaky soccer sneaks in there every now and again, I would like to welcome Ariana Dimorovic, who was born in Bihać in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Ariana's passion for football started from a very early age. She followed in the footsteps of her dad, who was a goalkeeper, coach and administrator. After pursuing some business consultancy in Milan, in Italy, she decided to enrol in the Fifa Master Program, which enabled her to join FIFA in 2013 as an intern. In 2014, she joined the women's football development team and has remained in this role for several years, working on the implementation of different development initiatives for member associations and confederations, as well as a legacy program for youth and senior FIFA women's tournaments. Ariana, welcome. I know it's going to be a bit weird. We're so used to seeing each other face to face at the moment. I'm going to go a little bit rogue right at the top of the show because the 2023 FIFA World Cup hosts are about to be announced, and it's a joint bid between Australia and New Zealand. They're up against Colombia. Now, I know you can't pick sides, but after having 86,000 plus at the MCG for the T20 World Cup final, surely the Down Under bid is looking good.
Hi, Mel. Thank you very much for the introduction. I mean, this week we are very excited. Whatever the decision is, following the France Women's World Cup last year, we're definitely all eyes on 2023. We are ready to work with the host or the hosts, whoever it is. There's a lot of excitement in the women's sports in general around this topic, but also in women's football. So we're looking forward to this decision tomorrow so that we can embark on this journey and really work towards 2023. Thank you.
You've done what we say in cricket as playing a very straight bat. So well done you for not getting too political on who the host will be. Our second guest is Belinda Clark. Tennis loss is cricket's gain after finishing 15-year playing career with Australia, littered with accolades and achievements, 118 one-day internationals, 15 tests, and captained the Australian women's team for the last 11 years until her retirement in 2005. Cricket trivia-wise, no one should ever get this wrong. She was the first player, male or female, to hit a double hundred in a one-day international. Hall of Fame's just chock-a-block. We would see it on her wall, but we can't see her now. I'm joking, Belinda. I know you don't have them up there. But the Sport Australia Hall of Fame, the ICC Hall of Fame, and was the first female inductee into the Cricket Australia Hall of Fame as well. I think a lot of people don't know as well, while Belinda was captaining Australia, she was also the CEO of Women's Cricket Australia and helped oversee the amalgamation, which was then the Australian Cricket Board, now Cricket Australia as well. She is now the Executive General Manager of Community Cricket. And the photo I've put up here for our introduction, Belinda, I'm looking at the one on the, I was going to say the right of screen, and I realise, yes, people can see that. It's you and I sitting there watching the Australian women's team lift the trophy when you were playing backyard cricket, or even 3 years ago. Did you ever think this day was possible?
Thanks, Mel. Great to be here. Just a wonderful event, and probably one of the highlights of my life to date, to see 86,000 people roll in and watch that match. And it was quite an audacious attempt at trying to get a world record. We didn't quite get there, but gee, we gave it a good shake, and just super proud of how Australians turned out to watch that event. But great to be here, and that was probably one of the highlights of my life to date, Mel.
Yeah, well, there's a few highlights, so that's pretty impressive as well. Right, we're going to get straight into it with the state of play, both in cricket and football. Both of you have been involved in it right from the get-go. I'd love to know what's been the biggest change in women's participation in sport, say, in the last 10 years from both sports. I'll start with you, Belinda.
I think the biggest change has been the visibility that has come about by putting more cricket in particular, but women's sport in general, on the television. It's led to more awareness. It's inspired local clubs and kids to take up sports that they thought were just for boys, and that's then in turn over time provided value for commercial partners, for broadcasters, and that the last step of that is to professionalise the game. So now we've really got choice for young girls playing sport. They can choose to do it for a living. They can choose to do it for fun, but really importantly, they can just choose to walk down to their local club and have a go at it.
Ariana, is that the same for the world game? And I'm going to get hammered by people saying the world game for football, but it has been known as that. It's played right across the globe. Is the visibility one of the biggest parts for you?
Well, yes, definitely. As I mentioned, the Women's World Cup in France 2019 was the game changer for us. Of course, we in the women's football or in women's sports, we're always keen, and we've been working for years, but actually to get the TV audience with the record global audience of 1.2 billion views, and the fact that a lot of people sat in front of their TVs and watched it for some of them for the first time, and really seeing the not just the investment we've been doing in terms of women's football, but also the quality of the game. It has improved so much, going from Germany World Cup to the Canada one and now to France, that has really managed to change so many perception on the women's football side, but also combined with the right messages on access, on capabilities, on opportunities or reach of the sport. It has been really game changer. And created a momentum for us that we now have to use, and not just for women's football, but in general for women's sports.
Ariana, I would think that most people, when they talk about sports leading the way within women and girls being involved in a sport, most people would probably think that football and cricket are probably two of the leaders in this area. How do you think football has been a leader? Could you hang your hat on one specific area that you're really proud of?
Well, I have to say within FIFA, I mean, we have the responsibility towards the sport, towards women and men. And from our side, within the women's football division that was created in 2016, we have worked on our first global strategy for women's football that has a very much top-down approach, working from the FIFA side towards the member associations and then encouraging them to work with their clubs and communities, but at the same time encouraging this bottom-up approach, because otherwise the whole implementation would not work. I would say it's our responsibility to set standards, to introduce competitions, improve conditions for players, increase the number of member associations that can participate either in the youth or senior World Cups, invest in the development of the game, invest in the capacity building of coaches, of staff, referees, volunteers, but always having in mind that given that the game is so global, our member associations are so different, and always to have this focus that while we're working with some of them on professionalization of their structures and of their game, many of our member associations are still developing their grassroots structures and working on community football. So while we have the strategy, always having in mind that one side doesn't actually fit them all, and we really have to remain with the tailor-made approach to support them the best way we can.
Mentioned strategic vision and planning. That was the first episode on 100% Cricket, was all about leadership, and our guest certainly spoke in depth about that. Belinda, I would say probably it might be a dozen years ago, there seemed to be a strategic plan put in place by Cricket Australia in terms of the development and investment in women and girls. Is that one of the linchpins and the foundation pieces to being a leader in the sport?
Yeah, it is, Mel, and I think the critical thing that was different at that moment is the investment was essentially created across the whole pathway, the whole gamut of things that you need to work in order to create a real opportunity for girls and women. So previously, the top end had received, the majority of the support and the effort, and this strategy was a real focus on the format of T20, make sure that we got a domestic competition up, which was the WBBL, put that on television, and then in turn invest in the community and start to understand and remove barriers for girls to participate at the local level. So it's an all of sport approach, and whilst it's important that we've got the strategies and the plans in place, but it's really important that we execute those plans well, and that's probably what I think we've managed to do over the last 10 years, and it has taken that long to reach the space we are in now, which is not the end of the journey, but it's really important that people are patient. This is a long burn, and to do it well, you need to do it over a fair amount of time.
Pick you up on that, because a lot of the phrases, particularly in Australia, and I'm guessing around the world as well, with the momentum around women's sport, is it's an overnight success. We know that both in football and cricket, there's a long history of women playing the game and being a value add to the game. But because this whole new momentum, probably in the last five or so years, has sort of really kicked on. Belinda, I'll start with you. What do you think the biggest challenge is facing women's sport right now, even though it has gained this momentum?
I think the biggest challenge is protecting the progress that we've made and not taking it for granted that the next steps will just flow without a similar amount of effort and attention. So whilst financial belts are being tightened across the world, really, with what we're experiencing at the moment, it'll be really easy for diversity and inclusion as a concept, but females playing sport is part of that. It'll be really easy for that to go backwards. So I think it'll be really important that we protect our investment, that we stay on the path, and that we don't become a nice to have. It's critical that this is a must have, and we've demonstrated that when you do it over a period of time, you do receive results.
Ariana, I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but I look at football, and I think most sports are pretty envious about its footprint right across the globe. But when you do have that large footprint, there's so many different cultures and countries all involved in the game. Is that one of the biggest challenges you face, is trying to get everyone on the same page?
I think definitely we have many challenges, because we try to support so many different member associations, so many different regions. But I will have to also agree with Belinda that the sustainability of the sport, especially now facing the situation with COVID-19, and that somehow interrupted the momentum we had from the Women's World Cup, and so many eyes on the sports, and so much investment and so much interest, that we have to now be wary of this and really address it. But of course, not just in terms of economic impact that it has had, but also what does it mean in terms of cultures, different cultures, and how do we still address some of the challenges we had even prior to COVID-19, and manage to change perception on women's sports in some of the regions that are still struggling with this.
Do you think it's fair to say that sometimes people say women's football and women's sport, for that matter, was sort of last at the table, so then it's easy enough to make them the first to leave in a situation like COVID-19? How do you try and get people on board to say, with women's sport, football in your instance, coming to the table, they've got the biggest opportunity of bringing new revenue to the game, because they've got the opportunity of opening up the doors for such a larger and newer audience?
Well, I think for us, and we've had this attitude for a very long time, even before COVID-19, that whenever there's a crisis for women's sports in general, but also for women's football, there is a huge opportunity as well, and we need to take that opportunity. What is important is that we, as the women's football division within FIFA, acknowledge the responsibility we have to work within our organization as an incubator of ideas and to propel the initiatives, the regulations, the support, to make sure that then we work with our confederations to align these efforts, and then we send the same message to the member association when it comes to women's football, that it's not just something to be dropped off because there's such an economic impact, but that there are solutions, there are initiatives, there are different ways, and we're here to support them. So there's been a lot of support coming from FIFA in terms of funding, releasing some of the emergency funds through forward programs, but also working in proper research in terms of impact of COVID-19 on men's and women's football, and how we then assist the member associations and they assist their stakeholders. So we're definitely all eyes on this situation, and we will make sure that everyone is still responsible for the women's game and tries really hard not to ignore this topic, but include it within the opportunities that we have in the next period.
Belinda, as head of community cricket at Cricket Australia, you're coming into the start of a season, only a couple of months away. How are you addressing it as a team in terms of the safety concerns more so than anything else, and getting people to feel that cricket will be a safe place to play sport?
Yeah, we're very lucky. We've got competitions at play at the moment in Darwin, and got some other comps, southeast Queensland and also in South Australia starting up. So we'll get a chance to run out the processes and the guidelines and see what works and doesn't work, and we'll be in a position to share those across other sports, and I suppose other places that don't start cricket until the Southern Hemisphere summer. So look, I think it's really important that the health concerns that we're currently facing and the way people have been caught indoors is difficult, because in some respects people want to get out and start resuming life as it was, and other people are really nervous about doing that. So making sure that people feel comfortable, that we've got volunteers that understand what their responsibilities are, and that we do everything we can to make sure they're as simple as possible in terms of implementing those. But I think this is going to be around for a little while. It'll become the norm, but whilst it's a change, it's difficult for local volunteers to get their heads around it, and it feels just like more stuff to do when they'd rather be out, coaching kids, or dealing with parents, or convincing people to be volunteers. So it's a real drain, but it's just absolutely important that we do it in order to get people back and make sure it's safe for them to return.
Yeah, we're going to stay local in terms of following on from what you've just said there. I want to stay within sort of the club land, sort of community sport land at the moment, and I want to try and get as practical as we possibly can for everyone listening in. You're at a local community club. Where do you start? How do you sort of get in your head the right way to go about attracting young girls or women into your sport? Ariana?
Well, I think from our point of view, we have the membership in terms of all our member associations are present within the countries, and we give them this responsibility to have certain strategies, certain messages when it comes to clubs and communities. Of course, we know that there's so many challenges depending on where you are in the world and what kind of community football or club football you want to start. I think there's a lot of literature available. There's a lot of programs available, whether it's through FIFA, whether it's through confederations or the member association levels. I think the information is key. Organizing something on a very local level can be done if you want to remain in the community, but also if you want to benefit from the existing structures, from the funding, and specifically now during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's important to also benefit from all the support that you can get for medical protocols. As Belinda mentioned, there is still in so many countries the COVID-19 situation has calmed down, at least when I look in Europe, for example, and there is this fear whether we start football activities or not, and what does that mean, and in terms of children, is it safe in terms of parents and audiences? Should we promote this? Can this actually backfire if we start too early? Because a lot of the people also think the sport is sacred to them. It's something very positive. We don't want to be the ones attracting and contributing to spread of the virus as well. So I think information is key. And if maybe it's not something that is available, the best thing is to reach out to the local member association. I know that the confederations are working a lot on this as well, but for anyone who wants to get involved in football, also reaching out to FIFA is a way, and we will find then a way to connect them to the local authorities and find a way how they can be part of bigger program or benefit from some of the resources that are available.
Fantastic. Belinda, we were both backyard cricketers to start with, and we had a little bit of luck on our journey in terms of getting in touch with teachers and the like that got us into teams. How do you take the luck out of it for clubs so that they've got something quite substantial at their hands that they know can make an impact straight away?
Yeah, I think, it's a well-trodden path, but having connections with your local schools is a good place to start. Finding a teacher or a parent that's, really wanting to get things moving. I think particularly with girls, sometimes you need to break down perceptions and barriers, and they'll be much more comfortable coming to the sport in groups, particularly groups that they've got bonds with already. So the netball team becomes the cricket team, becomes the football team, etc. So I think there's some well-worn paths that help people get started. But what's absolutely critical is once they're there, they've got to have fun, they've got to learn skills, they've got to enjoy the experience, and ultimately the test of a sport is really whether you can keep them engaged once they've taken that first step. So really, the strategy is make sure mum and dad find out about it. So how do you make sure that the information gets into their hands? How do you make sure it's a group? And how do you make them feel really comfortable that this is a transition they can make with their friends?
Mentioned in a way that sport, and particularly cricket in some ways, has some baggage for women. It's a difficult sport to play. It's quite technical. Some say it's unfeminine. It's too competitive. It can be aggressive. For some sports, press and social media criticism of over masculine bodies. There's all that sort of baggage attached to women and girls getting involved in sport. If that's all around, do we then go with a program? And I might start with you, Ariana, what you've seen in football. Do you go with a program that is purely girls only, or can you embrace mixed boys and girls at a young age or all the way through to senior level?
Well, I think it's something that we've learned in the last years as well, that there's two things that are very important: to give the girls access to the sport, but also to give them a choice. Because for a very long time, depending on the culture or member association, we are seeing that they're saying it's very important that girls are only playing with girls. And then there's also girls who want to play with boys, who want to compete. So we want to break that it's one or the other, depending on the culture and what the national environment is. I think the important thing is that they do have access to sport, and then they can also choose whether they play with only girls or whether they play mixed football. Of course, this is not the reality always, but it's something that we work with the member association depending on what their pathways are and where they want to be. What we always say is it's important for the girls, once they're entering the sport, that it's fun, it's inclusive, they enjoy it. But one of the things that is extremely important for us, that they have some kind of pathway, either through community football, school football, or club football, that after they've done this first initiation to the sport, or they've had a festival, or they've kicked a ball and they've had a lot of fun, that they have an option where to go next, that someone is explaining this to them and to their parents, so that we don't actually have a negative impact of having so many girls interested in the sport, but then not having access to regular training and competition. And this is something we at the moment are struggling quite a lot to create these pathways, to make sure that once they have the access to the sport and once they have the choice, that they actually can remain in that environment for as long as they want to be in that environment.
On from that, Belinda, if a club goes out there and sets up and wants to set up a junior girls team that only gets maybe 6 or 7 players, so they can't set up the full team, but they can combine them with some of the junior boys in the club, how mindful does the club need to be about the different reasons why girls play sport to boys, and do they need to look at structuring things slightly differently as the weeks go on?
Yeah, difficult. And I think Ariana mentioned this as well, that really this is about choice and making sure that you've got options in front of people. I don't think that differs between boys and girls. And if you're at the right skill level, a good coach can make a mixed team work really well. But the kids have got to want to give it a go and see if it works. So I don't think it's one size fits all. I would say if I had 6 girls turn up who wanted to play cricket, I'd ask them all to bring one friend, and there's a team. There's other ways you can try and encourage. You don't need 11 players to play a game of cricket. You can play a game of cricket with 7 aside. It's very productive. So just changing your thinking around, what do I need here? How do I join the club down the road who also might have 6 people? And so try and solve the problem in ways where the kids are part of the solution. They're contributing to what would you like to do? Would you like to go and get some other people and create a girls team, or do you want to join those 4 or 5 boys over there and we have a mixed team, and get them involved in the discussion?
Okay, we've now got a junior girls team or a women's team ready to play. Back when I started, I can't even remember how many different places I got changed to get ready for a cricket match. There was the car, there was behind the tree, there was the local toilets. There was hardly ever club rooms to go into to feel comfortable and safe before you go out to play. How vital is it in terms of facilities for girls and women's in cricket and football? How important is that in comparison to men getting involved in the game? What have been your experiences in this, Ariana?
Well, I think for us, in general, facilities have always caused a challenge in terms of access to the game, and it's always been a vital aspect to be able to grow the game and grow the participation. Because if we look at some of the cultural challenges in some of the countries, it is if the infrastructure is not there, the girls will still play. But for some, it's almost stops the development in general. So for us, it's having access to these facilities in the first place and creating a safe and inclusive environment. We have a lot of investment coming from FIFA to the member association that focuses on infrastructure. The message, and that we keep repeating with our member association, that this infrastructure needs to be available for girls and for boys. And some of the realities are quite different because we just have too many conflicting schedules, not enough infrastructure in general, more competitions than what the available infrastructure can fit. So what we've seen a lot, and what we're working with our member associations, is that they create specific infrastructure for women's football. And we've had this in a lot of our member associations. They are building football academies specific for girls. We've seen it in New Caledonia, we've seen it in Namibia, in Bhutan, in Venezuela. Just last year, they've opened a training center for their national teams, specifically for their women's national teams, that I had the pleasure to visit, and it was just amazing. And this is something we want to see across the world, for all the girls to have access. At the moment, we're also working with India for our Under-17 Women's World Cup, and there are some of the programs that work on creating safe spaces within our host cities or within the states, working with the state governments to identify some of the parks that are maybe not being used, and really, as you mentioned, creating some of those structures and facilities that are very much needed. So whether it's the changing rooms or toilets specifically for the girls to have access to this, to be able to change, to be able to play and have that safe environment. So we see it across the world. It is a challenge that we still have, and we have to work with our member associations to make sure that the girls have access. But then it also comes down to, once they have the access, to create as safe environment as possible, to really put the funding for girl-specific infrastructure if needed and when needed, to really make sure that when they do have competitions, when they do have to play, whether it's school football or club football, that they have all the structures in place that enable them to do this.
Ariana just spoke about walking into club rooms. We've all walked into a variety of different types of club rooms over our sporting careers. How important is that first step into a club room in terms of the visuals that you see?
Oh, it's very important, and I think once you get beyond the hard facility infrastructure, which was just explained beautifully around why that's needed, at a very simple level, you know, what does it feel like when you walk into this facility? What are the pictures you see on the walls? Who is being celebrated on honour boards? Where's the female names on the presidents, you know, who's been the president of the club? Is this really where you want your daughter or your niece or your friend to hang out? So there's a batch of stuff you can do once inside to visually make sure that people realise that this is a place for everyone. And some of those are relatively cheap to do. The infrastructure play is more expensive, and similar to football, we've invested a lot of money to retrofit some facilities that have been built many years ago, and there was nowhere near the number of girls and women playing sport as there are now. So that's a long-term play. It's expensive and it's required, and there's the shorter term play, which is a bit softer and easier and just as important.
Hey guys, I've just warmed you up. I'm now going to hand you over to the audience. We've got, as per usual, a plethora of questions coming through and lots of likes by the sides of them as well. With this one, the first one here is, and I'm going to do it because it's from my home suburb of Footscray. So this is Spiros, and I think it's the only Footscray in the world, so he's probably a neighbour. What is a simple step that we can take to get more women and girls involved at our club? Is there any great literature to read? We're very keen to increase our number of women and girls at the club. I'll give this one to you, Belinda.
Oh, thanks, Mel. Look, I think depending on the approach, my sense is you'd need to find some like-minded people and a couple of willing participants, and then you need to put them to work and say, if we're going to build this club, we're going to need everyone to pull their weight and go find some women and girls that want to play. So probably much easier to approach and get something running for younger kids. If you're going straight into the female market at an older age, you know, the type of cricket they're playing, have they played before, the experience levels are likely to be more varied. There's some other things that probably need to be considered, but local universities are good places to try and get in with the sports union. I think there's a uni over at that part of town, Mel. I think you might have even gone there. So they're trying to find places where females that are into sport congregate, and it could be the netball club, the university, those types of places, phys ed teachers, and once you've got a critical mass, you'll be up and running.
Okay, this one is specifically for Ariana, and I can't believe I'm reading this out because it's from India and they're talking about developing football. What's going on? India has a population of over 1 billion people. What more do you think could be done to make their ladies game more successful? Is cricket just too popular so football takes a back seat?
Well, this is a very interesting question. I think a lot of people would think something like this, but India has so much potential. Just the fact that there is so many people, there are so many boys and girls, and I'm happy to say not everyone is playing cricket. There is an opportunity to really work with schools and introduce different activities. I mean, whether it's cricket or football or any other sports, it's more how do we contribute to these communities, to these cities? How do we provide very good opportunities for boys and girls to participate in sports? Because now more than ever, we want to use sport as a social vehicle, for development. So for us, we're working quite a lot on a very complex structure where we work with our local organizing committee on the tournament specifically, but with the local federation to understand what are their structures on the national level, on the state level, what are the structures of the schools, what is the sustainability of introducing any of these type of competitions. As I mentioned before, we want to avoid of having a big number of kids that have maybe touched the ball once, but provide more sustainable opportunities for these kids to remain involved, whether it's now around the tournament, because we've had the boys under 17 and we are having under 17 coming for girls in India, or it's just in general that girls and boys have the opportunity to play football. One of the big structure that is helping this within India is through schools, because the children are in schools. It's an existing environment. It's a safe environment. Parents are not necessarily questioning too many things because the kids are already in schools. However, we need to support schools and we need to support the teachers in India specifically, because from our understanding, there's already too many expectations on the teachers, and also then developing physical education sessions and everything. That's where we need to step in together with the LOC, together with the state and national government, together with the federation, to unite and do this. And I really think that there's space for a lot of sports, because if we come up with an idea that we just want to empower these boys and girls, and it's through sports, for me personally, whether it's football or cricket, as long as they're getting this opportunity, it's the most important thing.
Well, Bedford has sent through a question, and I absolutely love it, because I think we often talk about getting girls into sport in the younger years, but then also we need to make sure that we can keep them in sport as well. And I think we're probably quite naive to think these days that people come into one sport and play it for their entire life. I think people these days, because there's so much choice, will come in and out at different stages. So what Paul's asking is, what have you discovered are the best ways to retain girls in sport once they have passed through the junior sections? And I think it's typically around that sort of 14 to 16 years of age, girls tend to drop out of sport. Belinda, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, a great question. And I think asking the girls that were playing, that are no longer playing, why they've made that decision will lead to some of the answers, and they may be varied, but making sure that people have the options of different ways of participating. So traditionally what happens in cricket is the older you get, the longer you play. And that doesn't necessarily fit with life these days, where the older you get, the more time poor you become. So how do you make sure that there's midweek competition options, so more social formats, and that you're not jamming everyone into one pathway, which you need lots of people in order for that to work. But unless we actually attack the root of the problem by understanding why they're walking away, then it's always going to be a challenge. But it's a problem for sport, full stop. It's a particular problem for girls and women, because there's not as many that start in the first place. So we see the impact of that age group drop off. We see that a lot more severely than the boys' game will.
Ariana, are you finding that in football?
Yes, definitely. And I think something that Belinda said was creating different pathways, because we see that so many girls, they join football, they want to compete, but then the ones that maybe drop out is because maybe they think they're not good enough, or someone told them that they're not good enough, and there is no way of another pathway where they just want to play for fun. And I think something that we do a lot now, more with the member associations as well, is to try to educate them early about different pathways, whether it's just through volunteering, through administration, whether some of them want to be referees, some of them want to be coaches, but just to really give them options. And even if some of them walk away at that age, we've seen a lot of people coming back through different roles, whether it's because their country is hosting an event, and it might even not be the event of the same sport, but the love towards the sport brings them back either to the same sport or to the other one, because they want to give back, because they have experienced the power that the sport had in their life and shaping them in one point of their life. So as more we talk about these pathways, these different options, and make them sustainable, make them a career option, maybe, and not in all the associations it can be a career option, maybe it's just through volunteering, but we felt that a lot of the girls that maybe even drop out is because they don't understand what can be next. They see themselves as a player or not. So this is very important to work on.
There was a wonderful campaign that was set up in England called This Girl Can, if people are looking for literature on why girls and women play and drop out. And one of the biggest reasons why they struggled to get women and girls into sport, they found was fear of being judged. And so I'd love to get you just to follow on from that question, both your thoughts on how we can address that, particularly as girls go through puberty and women coming into the game, that we can sort of take that out of the equation as much as possible. And I know this was a question without warning, so I'm going to start with you, Belinda. You can kill me later.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, it's difficult, right? Because cricket's a game where you're judged, and your score is written in a scorebook, and everyone knows what you did and how you got out. So it's a difficult thing to overcome. But I think if you just think about the concept of being judged can come from a variety of places, and my understanding is that in particular, girls enjoy being involved in the decision making, and once they've got a framework around them, they'll actually engage heavily to shape what that environment looks like. Boys a little bit less so, not wanting as much freedom or decision making or feeling of trust, and that's critical when you think about what are they telling us when they're saying they don't want to be judged. They're basically saying they'd like to have a go, but they'd like to have a go in private, and they really don't want the best to be pulled out and the worst to be put over on the side. That's challenging for sport, but I think you can, as a good coach, you can find ways of making that environment safe, and eventually make people comfortable with the fact that they don't have to be brilliant at everything. That's okay, as long as they're having a go, they're having fun, and they're contributing. That's what sport's about.
Yeah. We'll get back to the questions from the field as well. This is from Tamsin Chaffin. I'll give this one to you, Ariana. How would telling more stories about the history, well, she's asking for women's cricket, but women's sport in general, in documentaries, museums, Hall of Fames, affect participation in the present and the future?
Well, I think for me personally, but in general, I do think that storytelling is extremely important. It's for the generations now, as we said, women's football, women's sports, it didn't happen overnight. It's a reflection of something that many generations have worked towards, and many women have fought to be seen, to play, actually. So I think this is very important, that the generations nowadays understand the journey that the sport has gone through, and that we really show this, but also celebrate where we are at the moment. So also storytelling in terms of some of the biggest successes we have at the moment. Connecting a bit to the previous question in terms of just respect towards women's sports in general is one of the challenges we have. We always challenge whether the women are playing the same quality of football as men, or in terms of cricket. I'm sure it's quite similar, but we need to address that. And what best way to address that but actually telling stories that are real stories, that is something that people have gone through, that we celebrate all the competitions that we've done, whether it's through cricket or women's football, where we've attracted audience, where we've been really successful commercially, but also never always looking back and always respecting the pathway that so many women have created for us to be able to be here today and talk about the successes of the sport itself.
Belinda, this one's directly for you. This is from Linton Phillips, who runs a beginners cricket academy in South Africa. Hi, Belinda. Would you recommend that the current national women cricketers get more involved at grassroots level in order to encourage the girls to get involved at a young age? I think meeting the players face to face can start to create a role model type effect.
Absolutely, and I think as part of as the game grows and becomes more professional at domestic and international level, absolutely there's a responsibility for current players to play their part in getting out and inspiring the next generation. Very difficult to scale if you've only got X number of players and you've got a lot of kids that you want them to meet. So in addition to meeting them face to face, bringing them to matches, getting autographs signed, ensuring the players have time and space at the end of training sessions, etc. So bring the kids to the players, take the players to the kids, and then work out how you might engage with them on social media and other platforms which you can scale that access a little bit more easily.
Ariana, how's football utilised role models in terms of getting more women and girls into the game?
Oh, definitely. I think we, from a FIFA perspective, from a more global perspective, we utilize role models both in terms of female and male, because we really think that using some of our male advocates, whether it's the legends or the players, or it's just administrators, coaches, it's been quite positive and really a big enabler in that sense. But we always try to work with our member associations also locally. So balancing the global role models and the local role models, because in reality, for a lot of the children on the ground, wherever they are in the world, it is much easier to associate with someone who has gone through the same background, who's had the same background, maybe the same challenges, and then seeing that that person has actually succeeded and is maybe currently playing on the national team or coaching the national team, gives this additional motivation and inspiration for the kids. We always say, yes, it's very great to have a global star, because of course the children know who that is, but locally we also encourage that it's someone who can be a local role model, because it has more power and definitely more influence.
Speaking of role models, it's probably the best way to wrap this up. We've actually run out of time. Ariana and Belinda, thank you so much for your patience today with the lack of technology coming to our assistance. Thoroughly enjoyed your insights into the games of both football and cricket, specifically in terms of talking participation for more women and girls to get involved. Hopefully next time we come back on, we can see your lovely faces. But for now, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us, Mel.
Thank you very much, Mel.
Thanks so much, guys. Look, unfortunately, that is the last little bit that we've got here. We have all your questions recorded down, and like we do each and every week, we'll make sure that we can pass a few of those questions on to Ariana and Belinda over the coming days, and we'll get them to answer a few. We'll put those answers on the LinkedIn page, so if you haven't joined up as yet, please feel free to do so. We've had some incredible guests from within cricket, from other global sporting bodies, and from digital powerhouses sharing their knowledge and providing invaluable insight into what we can do to grow women's cricket and to continue to be a leading sport for women and girls. We would still love to hear from you. As I mentioned, LinkedIn is the place to be to continue all these fantastic discussions. From myself, I've had an absolute ball over the last 6 weeks. I've learnt so much, and I think the biggest thing learning for me is that as much as you're involved in the game, you can still learn different ways of going about things. So thank you so much to the questions that have come in from the people right around the place, to the guests that have been so engaging in the lead up to each Wednesday series as well, because they've poured their heart and soul into making sure that we can get as much content across to you as well. As per usual, things will sort of stay online with the ICC. So if you've missed any of the webinars prior to this one, please go back and have a listen. We'd still value your feedback as well. So from me, that is it. Thank you so much. I'm now going to pass over to Holly Colvin to say a few words on behalf of the ICC.
Thanks, Mel. And yeah, I'd just like to take the opportunity to say thank you to everyone who's been on this journey with us over the last 6 weeks, to all the guests, particularly Ariana and Belinda today, but actually throughout the whole 6 weeks, from the world of sport and entertainment, who've donated their time, to the audience who've been so loyal in continuing to tune in each week, and most importantly, engaging with us with some brilliant questions. I'd also like to thank 2 gentlemen who've been in the background helping look after the Q&A and polls, to Toby and Rob, who you never see each week but are doing a fantastic job to support it. And obviously couldn't stop without thanking you, Mel, who this series wouldn't be the same without your dedication, your passion for women's sport and growing the game has truly shone through. And I just want to thank you, not just for being a part of the series, but for leading the way in every single discussion. For me, it's been an absolute pleasure to kind of produce this series from the background, and highlights have been hearing from so many experts outside of cricket. But I think for me, it's been seeing the engagement all over the globe, having, as I can see on the Q&A, people from Qatar, from South Africa. We've had people from Indonesia, Cyprus over the last 6 weeks, and it's been a real privilege to watch the enthusiasm all over the globe. The whole purpose of this series is to reach the global cricket community. The ICC often only ever reach the international federations, and this was an opportunity to reach those that are not only looking after cricket in their countries, but looking after cricket in their communities, and those that are volunteering right on the coalface, and also to connect them. So to connect the global cricket community to grow the women's game, and hopefully we've shared some amazing ideas and really energized you around the world. And I think for me, it's asking, what are you going to do with that energy? What are you going to do with that knowledge? And so part of our poll for this last week is hearing from you and what you're going to do to pledge and support women's cricket. For me, it's going to be my pledge is to continue to connect everybody and to continue to share ideas. That will be done through the LinkedIn group, the 100% Cricket LinkedIn group that Mel mentioned earlier. So please join that, and I will continue to post stuff. And also, we'd love to, there were so many ideas around this 6-week series and on what we could talk about. And so if there was to be a second series, we'd love to hear from you what you'd like to hear more about. So please do drop on the Menti link there with the passcode 655521 and have your say and make your pledge. That's it from us. From the ICC, it's been a fantastic series. We hope you've enjoyed it too. Please stay safe, stay well, and hopefully we can see you again soon.